talked to, and of course these are references that he provided, everyone he talked to said he has very good communication skills, very effective communicator. They acknowledged the sort of initial gruffness. Okay, all three of the people who I spoke to acknowledged that, but said that he's very effective with parents, with faculty, and so forth, particularly with faculty. Acknowledged a good manager, acknowledged the fundraising and the finances. You know, at MSSM, when I talked to the board member there, he largely was administrator of the school. The curriculum and all the teaching was done by the teachers there, and he had, you know, he really sort of ran the school part of it, and so forth. One thing that was telling about and this gets to the concern, at the charter school of Wilmington, the board member I talked to there said that he was offered a contract, which Walt said that he had been offered a contract. What came out, though, was that the board had really tried to lobby him to stay on. Their expectation was that he had stayed on, and that this is what the board member said to me, that he had insisted to them that he came in as an interim. Okay, so the mindset that he had was, I'm an interim. He tried to convince them to name him an interim. They didn't. He still came in as an interim. Okay, in his mind.
He said that.
He said that.
I understand, but my point is that's not what the board thought. The board didn't bring him in as an interim. They brought him in as the permanent new ED. They did not do an interim. He had recommended, as had Barry Rowland recommended that. And so the guy I talked to said they were very disappointed not being able to, after he'd been there a couple of years, had been very successful, not being able to convince him to stay, and felt as though he probably had burned out. And so I could just talk to those things out.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of times an interim comes in when you need to clean house, right? And there's a lot of bad stuff happening, financial mismanagement. The interim comes in, cleans house, makes a lot of enemies, potentially, but then isn't suited to stay because you need somebody now, the good cop, to come in and carry the school forward. So I think
the board, though, had the expectation that he was going to stay, not that he was an interim.
Yeah. So there was dissonance between the board's opinion of what they hired him for and what he came in to do himself.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Just real quickly, I think that Walt would be a great administrator, sort of as a mechanic. I mean, I got a great sense of confidence that he can drive all the right types of things to happen. But I don't feel like, and I think he can sort of lead with authority, but the idea of collateral damage, because I think he really lacks a humanistic approach to people. He sort of lectures and really has this strong sense of this is the way it's got to be. So I don't know that he's a collaborative leader. So, you know, I think that the culture mismatch would be severe if he would come here. I mean, I'm just being very candid about that. What I do want to recognize, though, is that the board's been looking at some of the data that came back from the surveys, and the parents for Walt rated him very high. So the hour that the parents spent from 6 to 7, he got ratings on par with the other leader of that pack. So the parent community, with the hour they spent, thought very highly of him. And I wasn't in the meeting, and I don't know if any other board members were, but you know, there's quite a big mismatch in terms of what we're saying and what really the parents had to feedback to us. And I don't know, folks have opinions on
So
it.
some parents had conveyed to me they felt very strongly he was positive and they liked him.
Yeah.
I had a couple who said to me today that they thought very highly of him until they saw
Somebody else.
One, yes. So, and so I wonder how much of that rating, I'm not saying all that good rating is because he was first, but I'm wondering how much of that rating might be because he was the first one to shoot. And what's your own rating?
I also, on the other side of that same coin, the direct reports seem to have a very low rating for him, and so we've raised this idea that he might not be the best fit, and that raises some red flags.
registration
Yeah.
specifically had low marks for it.
Yeah, department.
I mean, I'm going to jump to a conclusion. Does the board feel like we should eliminate this candidate at this point, or should we move on and talk about the other?
Can we talk about all three and then
Yeah, I don't
talk
think
about, I'd rather us talk about all three.
I think we should have an equal conversation for all three.
Okay, all right.
And then
So let's move on to Dr. DeMello, and I don't want to put you on the spot again, Pauline, so maybe we can start with you, Mike, move around this way.
Sure.
I'll put you on the
So,
spot.
positive things. So I've had, because of the finance committee and other conversations, I've had a chance to get to know Dr. DeMello, even outside these meetings. I've been very impressed. I think this is an individual who has a very strong business sense, cares deeply about the school. If staying power is one of my items, I think Dr. DeMello will stay for a number of years, given the opportunity to see that work through. And so I think she brings a lot of good qualities. Her lack of charter experience has become a concern of mine. I thought last night her answer to my question, which is by no means a softball, but tell me about a model charter school that you look at, and what are those qualities, and the fact that she was unable to really name a charter school last night concerned.
Yeah.
And I think that my conclusion, as I'll turn it over to you guys, is that Dr. DeMello would be a very fine, strong, incremental leader that could move this school forward in an incremental way. But what I am looking for is someone who really has vision and experience and has built a few houses before and really understands the special nature of a charter school. And I'm not convinced that she has that.
All right. Go ahead, Ken.
What comes out with Dr. DeMello is clearly a love of science and technology and that whole thing, which is obviously a big part. She's very enthusiastic about it, brings a passion for it. Not only does she have it, but I think she's infectious in that way, and I think would succeed at that. I think she's also a big picture person, a systems thinker, looks at the big parts and you know, would be a good organizational leader in that sense. I think we all would acknowledge, including I think she would acknowledge, that sometimes the details of implementation have not always been her strongest point. But you know, in the interviews that we've had, including the one that the screening committee had, she was able to articulate that vision very strongly. I think one of the other things that is important that she does is I think she connects well with teachers, and though she doesn't have the charter experience, she has the teaching experience that allows her to connect well with teachers, which I think is important. So would I like her charter experience to be stronger? Yes, and that's, I think, come out obvious, particularly today, as being a shortcoming. And I'd like her to be better at the detailed work, but then after all, we are going to have a principal of some of this. So I guess that's my comment.
This is tricky for me, this person is my boss.
You can pass if you want.
But I would like to say a few things.
Okay.
I think that Dr. DeMello, I think she brings a lot of strengths. I love anytime I have a one-on-one meeting with her. I find her so genuine, so reassuring. I leave any meeting that I have with her buoyed. I think that, and I think a lot of teachers have felt that to me as well. So I'm going to try and relate to you not only my personal experiences, but sort of a collective experience that I've collected from my colleagues. I think that she has made a few decisions that staff members have questioned. One of them is her really strong public school experience, and for a lot of us, especially a large percentage of our faculty does not have public school experience. For some people, this is their first job or their only teaching job. Some people do. I have both parochial and public school experience, but there seems to be a bit of disconnect with what we offer as a charter school, that she can approach things from a way that somebody with a long career in public school has, and that sometimes that can be limiting. I'm going to give an example of professional development, which is one of her passions, and which is great. I'm not trying to say that I don't want any professional development, but sometimes there are like rules and requirements for professional development in the public school arena that we don't necessarily have to follow, and yet somehow there sort of seems to be a disconnect there, that she is like, well, you have to get this many PDP points and things like that. And I just, that has sort of been a red flag for some of my colleagues. Her passion, her STEM connections, her genuine classroom experience, she really connects with teachers, and I think there's something about her that is inspiring in a leadership role. I think, however, in the very nature of being an interim ED, she has come in, and like you said, Craig, sometimes the ED has to clean house. That was your phrase. I don't think she has come in and sort of upset the apple cart or anything. But in the very nature of coming into a difficult situation, especially without a principal, that there were landmines for her. And so that leaves her in a position with some staff members. She has stepped on some landmines.
Okay, Melissa?
So I think that she is most absolutely a passionate educator. I think she emulates that in every conversation that we have with her. I have to concur. My biggest concern is the lack of charter school experience, but also the lack of head of school experience. Yesterday we talked about, I think, one of the questions, the biggest differences in being a charter school, and the first thing that she spoke about is not having to deal with mandates that the public school system has versus talking about the flexibility and the creativity and innovation and the opportunity. I guess she went to the negative of public versus the positive of charter, and that to me was concerning. And as the parent rep, I have to say the parent sentiment is very low for Dr. DeMello.
You think there's any sort of things that rise to the top of that sentiment?
I think that, it was really good for me to see what the administration was saying and what the faculty was saying. I think she's rebuilt the community from, within, but she forgot the parent constituent group, and that was something that happened, and that was a problem last year, and I think, and we have not rebuilt the full community until we pull the parents in. So that's
Some of the things that have already been said, I would, in a sense, reiterate. I think the piece that stands out to me for Dr. DeMello is innovation, and her ability to do that from a sort of a STEM standpoint. Some of the things that she's done, her sort of global educational trips for faculty, her overall passion in regards to just education in general. I also think that from a leadership standpoint and a mentorship standpoint, as I've listened to some of the faculty in various board meetings talk about what she has meant to their careers relative to her ability to set examples and have conversations from a mentorship standpoint. So I think there's a lot that I think she brings relative to leadership, mentoring, and even over this overall sort of healing standpoint. Based on what we've seen just the last day or two relative to what some of the other candidates brought from a charter experience, I think clearly she doesn't have what she acknowledges the level of charter experience that they have. So that's one area for us to certainly to think about. So the highs for me are her leadership as a school lead, and the lows would be not having as much charter school experience as one would want, but she has sort of self-acknowledged she's on a learning curve.
I'm going to agree with Melissa a lot. I take a look at these these numbers that come through, and it's very clear that the administration thinks very, very highly of her, and the faculty and staff think very, very highly of her, and the parents do not. And, you know, that had me kind of scratching my head, and, you know, talking to some parents, and, you know, some little things, like not allowing them to have coffee tonight is, really makes me scratch my head, like, really? And so, like, little things like that, you know, just, I was actually kind of taken a little back by that. Also, the one thing that I kind of questioned was, you know, really the lack of not having a principal at this point is a concern of mine. And, you know, that's a major void in our leadership right now. Then I started thinking back about, like, last year in our interview process, and, you know, how actually I think it kind of might have hurt her being the actual interim from this period of time from a parent standpoint. Because I think back about how she interviewed for the interim
Back in
back in June, and I actually think, honestly, she would have blown everyone away. I think we would have all, you know, from how she interviewed at that point, I think we all would have been, you know, sign her up. I really do. So, and I think that, you know, I don't think we should really take that against her, because if any of these other candidates had that position, we'd be looking at the negatives too.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think we need to look at that. She's obviously done a really good job with the administration and the faculty. And I think obviously this needs to be some work with the parents. I mean, I think that's clear. But I do think that we kind of need to kind of compare apples to apples, where we're kind of not. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we only had 2 candidates though, because I was part of that. 5 people, I think, that was interviewed. There was only 2 candidates that were presented at that point, the finalists for the interim. So it was a completely different process than where we are now.
Yeah,
And I think that out of the 2 candidates, we felt, at least at that time, that since she had a desire to potentially want to be the full-time, if all things were equal, that putting her in would have given her that opportunity over the course of the year to have shown that that was something that, you know, would have worked in her favor. So I know it's your term, but I don't think that the comparison necessarily holds true.
Anything else? Okay. I think that Dr. DeMello, you know, sort of some of the experience, right? She's built a ton of bridges this year internally. She hadn't done it externally. She definitely brings a strong vision of, you know, I think she calls it world to one, kind of project-based learning and STEM innovation. I think feels like amongst all the candidates, she has that, you know, without a doubt. Much more passionate and much more experienced in STEM and STEM instruction and innovation. I think that that she would have a long ways to grow at Amsacs versus maybe a first we talked about is already there and may think of moving on. But I think Ms. DeMello would. She has a long ways to grow, and Pauline and I have coached her throughout the year. She's indicated the propensity to listen and try to learn. It's a lot of work, I think, undoing, if you will, some of the structure and rigor of the public system and coming into a charter system. So I mean, that's a concern. Can she make that transition fully? She's made a year's worth of transition, but can she become a charter school leader that is able to sort of disconnect the parts of the public education system that we're not trying to replicate here? So I think that's a question. Is she going to be able to overcome that? But I think there's the ability to grow and stay that I think is there with her. And I think we heard that a little bit. So you want to go on?
I agree with a lot of what has been said, and I have been feeling in the past couple of days that the reality is we do know her pros and cons, and we don't know the cons of any of the other people, right? And so that's actually really challenging because we're not comparing apples to apples. And I acknowledge it was a completely different situation last summer. But we we don't know how other people have performed in this year. And I look at these scores, it is without a doubt to me very concerning that the parent score is so low. The other two scores are so high though, right? And this is the faculty, this is over 50% of the faculty that came out with this number. So that's really very loud and clear telling us what.
70% of the.
Yeah, it's a huge number of the, and so, you know what, there was so much that she had to do this year, and we did tell her that was her priority. That her priority was the faculty and the people internally at the school, not the greater community. So without a principal, she had to focus and prioritize. She did prioritize what we told her to prioritize.
So just to clarify the numbers there, faculty meetings are always scheduled for Tuesday afternoons, and so all faculty members have cleared their calendars. We don't have doctor's appointments and coaching, and so every faculty member is available on Tuesday, which is when her after-school session was.
That's why you had good attendance.
And so I don't, that's not necessarily an indicator that people were like coming out to support or.
No, I didn't mean that.
So, yeah, you don't, but it's a
when
large
it is-
number.
And that high, and the percentage is really high with a large number,
But-
right?
but
So the
Paul,
rating
if
is
you
high.
look at the overall, just so we're clear, the amount of faculty and staff that, right, responded for the other two were significantly lower.
No, I understand,
Yeah,
but what I'm
okay.
saying is the rating is so high with a large number of
Right.
people, right? That's what I.
There's a
I
high
just
confidence
wondered
that
how
that
that's-
number's accurate, because it's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of.
think we should let the speaker speak unchallenged.
Okay.
You know,
Turns over.
The one thing that I will say in conjunction with what Craig has said is we have spent a lot of time mentoring her, and she is responsive to her. But it is a lot of work because it is a huge public school mindset. There is no question that is coming to it constantly. And I love that, and I do agree that she absolutely can innovate with STEM, and we've seen that in more of our discussions, on one-on-one discussions, and in broader discussions, like at the annual planning meeting, things that maybe other people haven't had the opportunity to see, that we have seen her be able to demonstrate. And so that is extremely strong. And I just lost my train of thought. I had another point to make, which I'll come back to if I can.
Go ahead, Roger.
So I've worked extensively with, I'm going to speak about the principal searches. I've worked extensively with Mary Ann on that issue, but overall, I think that she's a very good communicator. I saw her in the PTO meeting answering, at the very beginning of the year, answering a number of parent questions, answering respectfully, providing answers, or saying, I'll get back to you. So I think she's has a very good way of communicating with people, very respectful. She has a global vision. She has a technology vision. She expends an amazing amount of effort. And we're grading on effort. She's spending it. On the opposite side, concerns I have is charter experience. I also have a concern about prioritization. I've seen scenarios where there are multiple things that she could be investing her energy in, and I would disagree with the choices she made. One case that sort of folds in the principal search is that there were people that were doing, staff members who were on the principal search committee, and that while we were meeting to do the principal search at the same time that there was a professional development day, a team building one. They're both important, but if the most important thing we task the ED to do is to hire a principal, then I personally felt that should have been the more important thing to be done. And I was disappointed in the principal search in particular that we tried it once, we weren't successful, we tried it again using exactly the same methodology. No change other than the clock had moved. And even in the second time in particular, she was not even there to kick off the second principal search task force. And I felt that was, I don't know if that's a reflection of prioritization or what happened there, but it struck me as a negative.
Alice?
I think Dr. Jamel is a very competent, caring, considerate woman. She brings a lot of wonderful qualities to the table. I think she's got a real way of relating on a personal level. She makes you very comfortable to be around, and I think she was an excellent choice looking backwards